It's almost like you're playing a C7 arpeggio resolving to E flat. Yesterday we did some muscle memory development, a little technique, kind of non-arpeggio arpeggio, taking a basic dominant 7 arpeggio, but thinking of it as a major triad with a melodic tension note, and then adding chromaticism within that. Today we're going to kind of do something similar. We're thinking about a dominant 7 arpeggio, but we're really thinking about a major triad with a tension note. This tension note does not need to be a flat 7 in order to play over a dominant chord. Okay, it could be a lot of different notes. The flat 7 is a melodic tension note in the way we're going to talk about it today, not an equal partner in a democratic 4-note arpeggio. Right? These are not just rungs on a ladder that we climb up and down, up and down, up and down. These are different colors, melodic emotions and characters that we can throw inside of a major triad that will help produce different types of lines for us. Okay, Paul, what's up? Gary, hey, great to see you guys. So as always, we're going to start with basic G major triad. Okay, you can grab the PDF if you need help playing the triad, and if you already know the triad but you want to see this G7 arpeggio written out where the 7 looks different to help you get your mind right, you can. That's on the PDF also. Okay, the 3 triad notes are black dots. The tension flat 7, or the F note, is a white circle. Okay, pure G major, super boring, super vanilla. Okay, that's a bold statement. That note just jumps right out. We're no longer in vanilla land. It's still a little bit of a boring tension note to me. Right? I mean, it's just so obvious and cliche. It's kind of like the word Like, listen to me speak, listen to anyone speak. You're going to hear that filler note all the time, that filler word, in between sentences. People aren't sure what to say. There's that awkward moment of silence. We use words like because it's just societally acceptable. Like, we're all okay with it. And more often than not, there's really no reason to use it. Again, I'm not saying that there is no reason to use the flat 7. I'm being a little bit hyperbolic here. But for me, I went to an undergraduate I got my undergraduate degree from a school that was heavily bebop oriented, and then I studied short periods of time with a couple teachers, and then master's program. I've watched a lot of the videos on YouTube that I can find, and pretty much everybody talks about, make sure you know your scales, chord scale theory, and then 7-chord arpeggios. And then I look at standards, and there are arpeggios in them, but they're not as overly abundant as you would think based on how much we constantly tell people that they need to spend, 10 years of their life memorizing every inversion in every position of every type of string, every type of 7-chord on every string set. I mean, it's like 2-1-2, 2-1-2, 1-1-2, 1-1-2. Like, it's just unreal how much time we put into these things. And it's there, it's in the music, but there's a lot of other things in the music also. So today, we're going to break this down and we're going to think of it as a tension note. And we're just going to listen to it. Basically, what I'm going to recommend you do is play through it as though it were an arpeggio, but every time you get to that flat 7, rather than just playing through it like any old note, we're going to really hit it home. We're going to play it multiple times. We're going to resolve it back and forth with the root note. We really want to get the emotion and the movement that this note brings us into our mind and our ear. this point, to me, this should already start to sound more musical than if I was just playing a G7 arpeggio. Okay, if you don't know the G7 arpeggio, what I'm talking about doing is going to be very difficult, if not maybe impossible. So you should know that first, but as quickly as you can, you should be using it in the most musical way you can find, even when you're practicing. The way we practice informs the way we will play. So if you practice things in very mechanical ways, your improvisation and your playing is going to sound very mechanical. Right, that is a heavy tension note. I mean, that adds a color to things, to our line. I'm going back and forth between G7 and C7 at the moment, but it shouldn't sound like I'm playing arpeggios. I'm trying to really take advantage of these melodic tension notes, this color of the flat 7. We'll just go through our whole 1, 4, 5 right here. Here's the D7. Right, could you hear the 5, 4, 1? It's like a blues. Okay, this is a good game to play with yourself. Can you take a basic 1, 4, 5 blues, use a G triad, a C triad, and a D triad, and play over it where you're overemphasizing the tension flat 7 on all of the chords. Okay, think of the tension flat 7 almost like a character in a story. What was the name of Tom Hanks in the Castaway movie? I can't think of his name. I can think of Wilson, because I remember screaming Wilson, the volleyball. Can't think of his name. But like, tension flat 7 is Tom Hanks in the movie Castaway right now, right? There's different scenes, sometimes he's on the beach, sometimes he's in a cave, sometimes he's in the water, right? There's different chords. This character is moving through different places and acting out different things, building fires and fishing, but it's always him. He keeps showing up over and over. That makes sense? Tension flat 7, at least in the right context, even though it's a tension note, I don't know if you noticed, I landed on it right here and did not resolve it. Right, these are all tension flat 7s. They do want to pull up, but it's not the leading tone, it's not the major 7. So it's not going to be as strong of a need to resolve up. I think it was last week when I was talking about the tension flat 6 that I mentioned that half steps are where all the addictive, craving, deep human urges live in our music. The natural 7 is a half step below the root, so it's going to have a much more intense need to resolve up. The flat 7 wants to resolve up, but it doesn't really need to. Okay, we can let it linger. One quick point I want to make about this before I kind of start to wrap up, because I really don't have too much to say about this, because we all talk about it all the time, and ultimately what I am trying to convey in today's lesson is to stop doing what you're already doing with it. Okay, this is a lesson about disruption. for me personally, I'm always trying to organize or disrupt something. I'm always trying to create a structure that I can play with, that I can get my ear wrapped around, that I can get my mind wrapped around, that I can apply to tunes. And as soon as I organize it, I'm going to disrupt it. I'm going to change one thing. I'm going to take one thing out and add something different. I'm going to force myself to put it in a new key, new position, new whatever. This lesson is about me trying to help you disrupt what you've probably been doing for decades, right? A 7-chord arpeggio. It's like drilled in so deep to our neuromuscular system, the way we intellectually understand it, the way our nerves tell our fingers to move. It's so deeply planted that we kind of have to force ourselves very uncomfortably to let go of what we know in order to hear this thing properly and learn how to be creative with it, right? Once you get so used to something that you don't even have to think about it anymore, it's very difficult to get outside the box and to be creative with how you're using it. Which is why I think a good starting point, we'll do a couple steps here, and then I'm going to come back to the point that I was going to make a minute ago. Step 1 is to play it just as an arpeggio, but every time you get to the flat 7, stop, repeat it a couple times, move back and forth between the root note and the flat 7, like really break the arpeggio down physically, so you're actually breaking it apart and sitting on that tension flat 7 and listening to it move. Right, it doesn't have to be perfect. I went back down to the D here. There, I threw in the B up above it. Okay, so that's step 1. Step 2 is take that idea and make phrases with it over the blues, 1-4-5 blues. Okay, those are both really good practices. And then I guess you could say step 3 is pick a standard you're working on and apply it to a standard. Okay, this could be used over a handful of different chords, but the most obvious one is clearly going to be G7 or any dominant 7. The last point I want to make about this, and then I'm going to start to wrap up, a lot of my ideas, the whole concept of the triad plus tension note, like all of that, and if you're in the study group and you've worked through all our advanced kind of pianistic harmony stuff, a lot of those ideas come from my teacher, Stefan Harris. If you don't know Stefan, you should absolutely be listening to his music. It's unbelievably, insanely gorgeous. Brilliant mind, unreal musician, and he got me at the piano thinking about harmony from the standpoint of triads, thinking about melody from the standpoint of triads, and a lot of what I used to develop the curriculum that I relearned to play with and that I teach here, a lot of those ideas come from him. Not entirely all him. I had a lot of wonderful teachers that I took ideas from and tried to mix some of my own personality into them. But there are certain things that I intentionally deviated from Stefan's method. And one of them was that he had a rule where you couldn't use the tension flat 7 unless you were playing over a dominant chord or a diminished chord. And it makes sense because here's G7. Okay, if you follow the materials in the study group in our courses, if you follow the hierarchy of harmonic importance, which I think is a name Mike came up with. I don't think that was his name, but it's the same concept. The tension flat 7 would be the primary tension note. It would be the first in line to get used, and it is very harmonically respectful. To me, I changed that rule a little bit. By the way, here's what it might sound like if we're doing diminished. Here's B diminished. And I'm going to use a G major triad. Right, all the notes should sound in, and G should sound the most stable. There's There's tension flat 7. Can you hear it? It's actually the diminished fifth, the chord tone for B. What was the riff from yesterday? Right? G7 chromatic arpeggio riff. Over B diminished. It works. You can put it over any of those diminished chords. So he was cool with that. It follows the harmonic importance, the hierarchy. I altered that rule a little bit. I made a rule for myself because while it does work, and I do use this note in this context, when it comes to the primary tension note, the primary quadratonic, like the color that I want to be my go-to painting color, I don't think that's the best option. I think it's still a little bit too cliche in my ear. You might disagree. I know Stefan disagrees. This is art form, right? This is not science class. There's not always going to be one right answer. My preferred go-to is to skip the flat 7 for the primary note. I'll come back to it as my secondary note. It's still a super important note, but I like to jump to the 9 first, right? That's why if you work through our Lines for Life course, all my dominant chords are tension 2s, not flat 7s, because I'm either thinking about the natural 9 or the flat 9. And then when I want to do my pentatonic scale, then I'll bring the flat 7 back in. So here's a quick example so you can hear the difference between these two tension notes and then maybe get an idea of one of the reasons why I skip it when it comes to a pure quadratonic as opposed to the pentatonic or our 6-note bebop scale or any of the other scales we can add on top of this. Here's the G triad. Right, there's flat 7, tension flat 7. Now I'm going to go back to just the pure triad for a second. Okay, that's tension flat 2. That implies the sound of a G7 flat 9, which is obviously going to be a little bit more hip harmonically than just a standard G7. And more importantly than it being more hip is it's just less expected. It's still very lyrical, like it gives a nice melodic contour to the line, but you wouldn't expect to hear it. Not in the same way that you would expect to hear the flat 7. It kind of implies the sound of diminished a little bit more, right? That dominant diminished. So mess around with both of those separately if you want to. They're very related to each other when you're playing over a dominant chord, the flat 7 versus the flat 2. And then if you want to, you can actually create what I think of as a pentatonic scale, although most people would just classify it as a 7 flat 9 arpeggio, but again, I'm not going to use it that way. You can then add both of those notes to the triad. So you get the G major triad, tension flat 2 and flat 7. An arpeggio because I want to hear the tension points, the resolution points, and to be able to think about doing leaps, right, to jump from here up to this note as opposed to having to hit every rung on the ladder. I want to be able to throw chromaticism in. There's our Dracula note. Okay, it leaps off the page a little bit more in my ear. You use your own ear, decide what's right for you. We're going to wrap up there today. We're going to do some playing with this tomorrow. Okay, 2-5-1's tunes. We'll apply this probably over some dominant ideas, maybe some lesser expected ideas. Think of maybe a flat 3 diminished movement could be fun, because it's a diminished chord, but it doesn't function. It doesn't overlap with the dominant that we're seemingly arpeggiating, like in come on brain, you can do it. What's the name of the tune? Body and Soul. There's an E diminished chord in the A section. And over that E diminished, you can actually think of it as an inversion of C7. You can play a C major triad, tension flat 7, you can use the tension flat 2, whichever one you want. It lines up with the melody of the tune. The melody is based around that sound, that triad, but it doesn't resolve to F, it resolves to E flat. So that's like, it's almost like you're playing a C7 arpeggio resolving to E flat minor. Can you hear the dominant 7? But I'm using that flat 7. That's my tension flat 7 up to the root for the B flat dominant. And then voicing a resolution, playing G flat, it's the minor third of the E flat chord. I skipped a chord or two. I wanted to get to that E diminished and let you see that I'm playing a C7 chord here. That could be a fun idea, to try and play through a whole standard or a whole section just hitting the flat 7s. Not that the E flat is actually a flat 7. Maybe I'll think of it as a... Okay, that's like a 6 chord. But I'm playing C7. Right, can you hear all these flat 7s resolving up? That's maybe, what was that, like step 5? Play the arpeggio but break it apart, okay? And really pay attention and emphasize that flat 7. It's like the arpeggio version of what I was just doing over can't believe I keep forgetting the name of this tune. I just said it like 5 minutes ago. Body and Soul. Play just the arpeggio up and back, but really break it apart and really pay attention to where that flat 7 is and treat it like a tension note. Let it resolve. Overemphasize those resolutions. Do that first, then keep it simple. Apply to a 1-4-5 blues and use that as your sort of main character, right? Like Tom Hanks in Castaway, that's the only character you get to write for. Now you have to make an interesting script. Imagine being a screenwriter trying to write a movie that has one character in it. Like, if you can't do that, then it's really difficult to write a script for 5 characters or 10 or 100, because you have to be able to get inside the mind of that one character and bring him to life or her to life. 3 was, what was 3? Applying to a standard. And then I guess 4 would be being super strict about it. Like, can you make lines? You can voice lead chromatically, you can connect them diatonically, but can you make lines just based on not the arpeggio of the 7 chord moving up and down with little bits of phrases and tension flat 7 emphasis, but can you just use the flat 7 resolving up to the root over your chords? And I did alter it for like 6 chords, and a few of the chords don't have flat 7s in them, although we could turn everything into a dominant, I guess, if we wanted to. I'm going to have to sit and do that on my own time. I won't do that on live video. Hit me with questions in the comments if you got them. Open office hours for both the full membership study group and the light and standard version this weekend. And we'll be back tomorrow and do some more tune application. Mess with this today. Really try and break your habits. That's what today was all about, disruption. Break your habits. Nothing wrong with flat 7s. They're wonderful. It's a great note. It's 1 out of the 12 sounds we have available to us, so take advantage of it. But try not to get trapped in your habits and your, decades-long processes. Not to say that we shouldn't have muscle memory or riffs or arpeggios. Those are all tools at our disposal. But at the end of the day, if you practice and think about music mechanically, that's what it's going to sound like when you play. So if you want to sound more human when you're playing, more organic, like the music is coming from a living entity and not from I Real B or Band in a Box, then you need to start thinking that way, right? You need to take every tiny little detail into account when you're practicing and treat it with respect and belittle yourself, humble yourself at the feet of the tension flat 7. It's not just go memorize this and now you've got your 7 chord arpeggios. It's a very intense note. So spend some time getting to know it and letting it have the space it needs to do what it wants to do. Cool? Happy practicing. I'll see you tomorrow. Hey YouTube, it's Jordan Clemens with NYC Jazz Guitar Master Classes and the Melodic Triad Study Group. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I have a ton of content coming out on YouTube this year. We've been doing daily jazz guitar lessons. So I'm going to be posting videos like this pretty much every day. So if you dug this and you want to follow me, subscribe and make sure that you turn on notifications so that you can watch more videos like this. Thanks again for watching. Hope to see you in the comment section. Hope to see you in the next video.